this is fantastic. I really want to thank Jackie Walker and Kelly Weiss for coming out here today for via Zoom, and for the next panel discussion. I want to first introduce Jackie, and then we'll introduce Kelly, and then we'll get started. So Jackie Walker is currently both Kelly and Jackie are both lawyers, both entertainment lawyers. And Jackie got her start in New York City, and Kelly is out on the West Coast in LA at ICM Partners. But Jackie, why don't we just start a little bit with your background? I don't want to say too much about the backgrounds because I think both of you had these tremendous backstories. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today in terms of how you both broke into the industry, and how some of the stories and really what it takes for those students listening and alumni listening, what it takes to really work in this industry. So I'm not going to take too much time to go over your resume and background, but I do want to say a little bit. So Jackie, you spent time at CAA, and from there went to the Harry Walker Agency. Both good experiences, which we want to hear about. We actually want to hear about some of your experiences in a non-legal role and how you broke in. So I'm interested in talking more about that. But then made a decision to come back to Pittsburgh, and currently operating the law office of Jacquelin Walker, and doing some other things in terms of yoga and some other work, working both with artists, entertainers, and then also some what I'll call more traditional business clients. So welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I love speaking with students at Point Park. So this is it.
Oh, great. Well, why don't we, and then we have Kelly. Kelly, who Kelly is a Pittsburgher. Grew up in Pittsburgh. Is that right, Kelly?
I actually grew up in Philly.
Or Philly.
I went to college in Pittsburgh, so I was there for 4 years. Yes.
I'm sorry. So yeah, I knew that you interned with Ed Traviseri in college. So this is where the journey began. So at DeCesar Engler in college, and went and spent multiple years at DeCesar Engler. From there, you I think went to work at a theater company, and then jumped on the Lollapalooza tour. Is that correct? Which we want to hear all about that, Kelly. At the same time, you went to law school, which to me is it's amazing that you were able to kind of do both of those while you were attending law school. We then from Lollapalooza and that experience, which we want to hear all about. Went to work for William Morris Agency, spent significant time at William Morris, and then spent time with the Paradigm Agency, Live Nation, and now with ICM Partners. So we really appreciate you both being here, and look to draw upon the experience that you both have in the industry. So let's start out, Jackie. Quick question. Let's start with your first job, kind of breaking in to the industry. How did you kind of get into the entertainment industry? And why don't you start from the beginning? I've heard this story. I've had the benefit of hearing this story before. So if you can take it from the top, as they say.
Okay. So I studied undergrad in Atlanta, Georgia at Clark Atlanta University. And their mass comm department is pretty well known in that region. It's where people like Brian Barber went. It's where Spike Lee studied while he was an undergrad. And so that was the draw. So when I graduated from that program, I was able to find a job at Turner Studios, which is like the holy grail in Atlanta in the early 2000s. I worked in their franchises department, which is the equivalent of what we would call branded marketing. I worked there for a couple of years before I went to law school, and that was actually how I broke in. I do not think that without that production experience that I would have been able to really make the connections and the additional contacts and have the credibility to do the next things that happen. And so after I left Atlanta, I moved back to Pittsburgh because I'm from here, born and raised, went to Shinley High. Woo, woo. And I ended up doing an internship here with Steeltown Entertainment Project, which was at QED. I don't know if they're still there or not. And then I ended up working with a barrister in London at one point, which was awesome. And then I ended up at CAA after I graduated. And I got there by connecting with one of my law law school colleagues, who was just like, "Hey, I'm working at CAA. It's, she's like, I'm an assistant. We know we have law degrees, but this is how we break in. Let's do it." And I said, "You do not have to sell me on this. I'll come up and see if it works." It worked. And I met so many amazing people along the way just in that one job. Like, it made the transition to New York so much easier. So I'll leave it at that. You asked me how I broke in. I gave both of my breaks.
That's great. Kelly, let's go the same question for you. I mean, we know about, tell what it was like. How'd you get the job with Ed Travisari and the Caesar Engler?
Well, I was staying at school during the summer instead of going home. I believe it was between my sophomore and junior years at Pitt. And I had a friend who was interning at the Caesar Engler. And he said, "Hey, they're looking for more people to help out at shows and just kind of work in the office, do admin work." And I said, "Sounds great. I'm taking a couple of classes. Sounds fun. I'll come do it." And so I went. As you mentioned, worked for Ed, was one of my bosses, and Rich Engler. And the production manager at the time is a gentleman by the name of Gary Hinston, and he was just starting out as well. And I just did, office work, the regular internship type things. Started following Gary around. Everyone joked around and started calling me his shadow. And at shows, I would help him out with passes, with catering for the artist's dressing room, helping him coordinate travel and hotels and things like that locally for the artists that were coming in to perform. And then I just kind of started, really picking up on the production elements. I really liked learning everything that I could about it. I also started following around the electrician, a guy named Sheldon, and I asked him to teach me about power, three-phase power, and how everything kind of connected with sound and lights, and just tried to soak up all the information that I could. And eventually, as we were getting, busier, Gary started having to cover larger shows at what used to be the Civic Arena and at, Three Rivers Stadium at the time as well. And so he would ask me to cover the smaller shows. I would do club shows around Pittsburgh, shows at the Syria Mosque and the Syria Mosque Ballroom, which is also where our offices were. And I believe now is a parking lot for Pitt, right on its campus. And so I just was interacting with tour managers for all of the bands that were coming in and production managers. And I started, really getting involved in the advance of the shows, the artist production and technical needs, their dressing room needs, local ground, hotels, all of the things that it takes to locally coordinate the logistics for a live performance for these bands. And so the summer ended, my internship should have been done. I think I told Ed and Rich that I didn't want to leave. And Rich said, "Sure, you can stay, but we're not going to pay you." And so I stayed on as an unpaid intern, and I would go to classes, go to the office in between classes and advance shows and do shows on the weekends and, weeknights. And did that all throughout my junior year and my senior year. And so I graduated from Pitt in 1990. During that last year, I worked with several times a tour manager named Stuart Ross, and you'll hear his name come up frequently during my stories, and Ed knows him well also. He's a very well-respected tour manager in the industry and still working. And I met him. I told him that I was thinking about moving to Los Angeles after I graduated because I really wanted to work in event production, and I wanted to go on the road. I wanted to tour. That was my goal. And he said, "Well, when you move to LA, give me a call. I want to introduce you to my friend. She's a woman who runs a theater in Los Angeles." And I had had several people tell me, you know, oh, give me a call when you move to LA. Stuart was the only one that I actually called. I felt that he was on the up and up, and some of the other people were just like, you know, sure, you know, you 19, 20-year-old kid, give me a call when you get to LA. So called Stuart when I got to LA. He introduced me to Rena, his friend, and I started working at the Wiltern Theater, which is in Los Angeles, doing a lot of similar things that I was doing during my internship with DeCesar Engler. I was stocking dressing rooms. I worked security at the backstage door. I was stamping backstage passes for people. Rena's husband happened to be the production manager for the theater. So of course I attached myself to him and said, I want to learn about, you know, all the staging elements and production and house lights and house sound. And it was a union venue at the time. So it was union crew. I wanted to learn all about payroll and the union regulations, things like that. And so I was working at the Wiltern. Then Stuart came back around and he said, we're starting this tour called Lollapalooza. It's going to tour. It's going to have 10 bands. We're going to do 40 cities in 8 weeks. And we need someone to do our ticketing and our marketing. And he said, so you need to talk to Rena and go train in Ticketmaster and learn how to run a box office and how to read Ticketmaster reports. So Rena let me go and train in the box office, and I learned all about ticketing and learned about some marketing. And 92 was the first year I went on tour with Lollapalooza. They had a tour in 91, but I started in 92. And so I went on the road. It was 8 weeks, 40 cities, US and Canada. A lot of people listening now know Lollapalooza as the weekend event in Chicago every summer, but it did start out as a touring festival, and it was the first one of its kind. No one had ever done it before. We were kind of making things up as we went along. A lot of the amphitheaters that now exist did not exist, and we were playing empty fields. So we were bringing in a stage, we were doing steel builds, and we were playing in these big fields, and it was general admission. So loved it, loved touring, loved being on a bus. And I would do that in the summer, and then just kind of come home and have September through December off. And then in January, the offices would reopen and they would start putting out artist offers for the next year. I would put tickets on hold with all of the venues for all of the bands, do the marketing. I would approve all of the ads for all of the shows, coordinating the on sales, things like that. And then after a couple of years, I thought, I really love doing this. I really love live events and the music industry, but I don't think I want to tour forever. This is really fun. I'm in my early 20s. It was like summer camp on wheels. My father joked around that I ran off and joined the circus, and he was not inaccurate in that statement, because it really was like that. And so I decided to go to law school. And so what I did was an unconventional, progression to becoming an attorney, which is I would tour with Lollapalooza all summer. I would work in the office during the year, and I went to law school at night. So I did 4 nights a week. It took 4 years because I was going part-time, and then I would take the summers off and tour. Finished law school in 97, was doing Lollapalooza every summer up until that point. And the booking agency, the talent agency that booked the Lollapalooza tour was William Morris Agency. So I had gotten to know a lot of the agents there. And I said, okay, I've now graduated from law school. I've taken the bar, waiting for the results, which Jackie, you can attest to, is a painful 4 months, finding out if you passed the bar or not. And I went into William Morris, but they did not have an attorney position. So they said, we can give you a paid internship. And I thought, great, I'll be an intern, but I'll actually get paid. So I was a paid intern at William Morris for 2 years. And then an attorney position opened up, and I became a paid full-time attorney in the legal department. So that meant I was handling live performance contracts for their roster of clients, negotiating all of the legal clauses of contracts. And I will say that my production and touring experience and ticketing experience really gave me a unique perspective to approaching, reviewing, and negotiating these contracts, because a lot of attorneys they look at the legal, that's what they know, but I was able to look at the contract as a whole and address the issues that a lot of times are left really just to the agents to deal with. So it was very helpful to have that perspective and the experience I had. So I stayed at William Morris for 16 years. And then we had the merger with Endeavor. They were changing the department structure around. They were kind of really trying to scale down the legal services that were being offered to their clients. So they wanted me to become a full-time agent. They wanted me to transition from being an attorney to an agent. Did not want to do that. So I left William Morris, and for a year, I just kind of consulted. So I worked for various promoters. I worked for some of the clients of William Morris just from my house, reviewing their contracts, things like that. That led to me being asked to consult on a new 1,800 seat venue that was opening up in downtown Los Angeles. So I consulted with them on their legal agreements. And then they said, you know what, we need a general manager. Can you be the general manager? And I said, I've never done that before. And they said, well, let's give it a shot. So I decided to stop being an attorney. I tried to retire from being an attorney and be the general manager of this venue. So I was booking the talent that was coming in. Unfortunately, I was still negotiating contracts and deals on behalf of the venue with their stagehands, with all of their production vendors, their ticketing agreements, things like that. I loved it. I did that for a couple of years, but I really missed working at an agency and working with artists and representing the artists. So I went to what was Paradigm Talent Agency. It no longer exists. It was purchased a couple of years ago by another agency. So I was at Paradigm for 5 years, doing the same job essentially that I had done at William Morris. I was in the legal department negotiating artist performance agreements, and was there for 5 years. Then was presented with the opportunity to go work at Live Nation in their global touring division. And I thought, this is something I've not done before. I've never worked for a promoter in that capacity. And the global touring at Live Nation is they do something with artists called a 360 deal, where they will book and promote an artist's entire tour. And it's usually a world tour. And they will also produce the tour on behalf of the artist. So they will provide and negotiate the deals for all of the production, staging, buses, A to Z for an artist to produce a tour. So I did that. It was a fantastic experience. I learned a lot. I dealt with a lot of international law, international promoters, got to work with a lot of high caliber artists. But I realized, my second year in, again, that I missed working with artists and working on the artist side. And that was really where I wanted to be. So COVID hit, coincidentally, during the second year of my time at Live Nation. And during COVID, I was miraculously somehow offered a job because the industry came to a standstill. No one was spending money, but everyone anticipated the reopening eventually. And I was offered a position to go to ICM Partners, which is another talent agency. And I am currently at ICM and doing the same thing for artists that I had been doing, although the job has changed a lot. In addition to performance contracts, I have to negotiate streaming contracts and, all of the kind of ancillary agreements that go along with a performance that really didn't used to exist, but now that are obviously, very popular. So I've also gotten a little bit into sports. We have a big sports division at ICM, and I've been negotiating boxing agreements of all things. So it's been very interesting and something new that I'm learning, which is fun. And that's currently where I am.
Kelly, that's amazing. Have you always had this kind of intellectual curiosity? Is this something or is it something that you developed on the job? I mean, you go back and you look at all the different roles and different areas of production and ticketing and promotion. I mean, was that something that just interested you along the way as the opportunities came up, or did you seek them out? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
It was a little bit of both. You know, I did seek out opportunities to learn new things because I get bored and I want to learn new things and do new things and break up the monotony. And I'm sure Jackie, you probably have a very similar viewpoint based on your experience as well. But also sometimes I would have to learn new things in order to be able to take advantage of an opportunity I heard about, or you know, a need within the company, and I would say, oh, you know, I want to learn about that. And really it comes down to wanting to understand all different aspects that go in to entertainment, because everything that you learn along the way, you take with you, you retain that knowledge and you apply it to different situations. And it really gives you a broad and big picture perspective on the job that you're doing. And, you know, information is power. Information can never be taken away from you. And everything that you learn along the way is always going to either help you advance or help you in your current position. And, you know, I always tell people, and I've told ed students when I've spoken with them at Polestar, you know, do anything and everything. No job should be too small. No job should ever be beneath you. Because you will be recognized for doing a good job if you're, you know, stamping backstage passes and working security at the back door and interacting with people. You'll be recognized for doing a good job, and people will offer you opportunities to do something else because they see that you're a hard worker and that you're willing to learn and you're willing to do anything and everything to get the job done and to help the show happen. So you know, it's just surround yourself with good people. I've been very, very lucky to have great mentors along the way that have taught me different things that I still maintain relationships to this day. Ed is an example of one of those people. And, you know, you just can never replace the relationships and the experience, and just having the knowledge and information to apply to everything.
That's great. Jackie, kind of same question. I mean, the traditional law degree pushes you towards specialization. At least a lot of people would say they want you to kind of specialize, and the riches are in the niches. But seems like, you know, entertainment. The more you learn, as
You're a
Kelly has said,
generalist. People,
yeah,
everybody said, like, they're like, so entertainment law. I was like, it's not a real area of law. Like, it's entertainment law is, I know people, I know things, I know how to get to information, and I have the right contacts to help me get to this other information that I might not be able to get to. And so you do have to be curious, you know, like a lot of what, you know, Kelly's story, Kelly went into much greater depth about her story. Um, and but it's on the one hand, I think the lessons I've learned are that you have to be willing to do the down and dirty jobs. You have to be willing to, especially in the beginning. But I think what I've also learned is, as you begin your ascension and as you want to be taken seriously, you have to have boundaries. Like, the further you get into your career, the more you have to practice really strong boundaries with people, because as somebody who does not come from um, I don't come from a background where I know a ton of people, where I can trade in certain types of favors and things like that, which is what I saw a lot of, right? I, you know, didn't come from a background where, like, oh, my parents are lawyers or they're connected in this way or I know all these people. I didn't have that. So I couldn't lean on, well, if I can get in front of this person, if I go to this very expensive concert or this, you have to figure out what hand you can play and play it effectively. And so the hand I had to play was that I understood my worth, I understood my skill set, and I would not be disrespected. I did not care who you were. And at first, I got my hand, you know, I definitely got checked a couple times, where it was about maybe showing me my place to a certain degree. But I think what came out of that for me is where I'm at in my career now, which is somebody who has significant autonomy, who is very clear about, you know, what I bring to the table, the knowledge I bring to the table, and what my goals are. And so if I'm interested in practicing equity and bringing equity into the art space, I cannot tolerate inequity in any way. And so when I'm out in the world, and what I learned along the way was to just be very clear with people. And eventually, people were like, wow, she's a tough cookie. And she made sure I respected her. I said, look, I'm willing to do what you need me to do. Don't disrespect me along the way. And I think that's a very important lesson to learn early on, because so much of what goes on in the entertainment industry, people don't want to talk about how it can be abusive, but it can be. And there are tons of articles about it. There's so much information about people revealing what happened. And what I love about this generation of students coming up is that y'all are not on that at all. And so it's really about understanding and being clear about the risk you run in asserting yourself and finding effective ways to assert yourself, because and or preparing yourself for what comes when you assert yourself. And sometimes it's not the rah rah win that we see on Disney specials. Sometimes it's, and it's time for me to get up out of here. It's like that's my cue. So um and these are the aspects of the industry that are so ingrained. It's not going to change. You coming in, it's not going to change it. It's about you being aware so that you can make good decisions for yourself along the way. My mom told me, your integrity is what you have. You need to be able to look yourself in the mirror when you go to bed at night. So do not do anything that will have you doubting yourself or mistreating yourself along the way. And that is what I went to go work. That's the attitude I took to work and I take to work with me. And it got me through so many things, so many deeply uncomfortable experiences that really shaped where I'm at right now, which is very focused on artists, very focused on making sure that artists understand their rights, they understand how to negotiate for themselves, because they're not always going to have a lawyer who can do that for them. But if they have sense, if they have some acumen, if they are able to say, this is what I want, if you can articulate what you want, your you know the outcome you want from a deal, you can move toward your goals. And you can do that without legal support. And because people are going to do it without legal support. And that is what I've accepted. Everyone does not have agents, managers, etc. And so I am interested in supporting artists and deepening their understanding of what they're up against so that they can make good decisions for themselves, because I can't make those decisions for them.
So speaking of decisions, a lot of students on here. I'm just looking at a lot of the names. A lot of juniors and seniors, and I see some students and former students of mine. Um, if they want to work in the entertainment industry, both of you made decisions to leave Pennsylvania and go to a different city. Can you just tell us about that decision? Was that a difficult decision, or was it a no-brainer? And this part two of that question is, what would you say to students listening, and anybody interested in working in the entertainment space? Do you have to be in New York, LA, Atlanta, Miami, or can you find work in other cities? Jackie, what do you think?
I think you need to go. Both times I left for training. I left for better connections. I left for people and places that could show me the ropes. Not because Pittsburgh is a terrible place. Pittsburgh is great. I just think that the level of knowledge, the body of knowledge, and the types of contacts you're going to make, even if you're based here, um, you want to be the best. You want to build skills. The way that you innovate in something is to first learn how to do the thing as it's done amongst your peers. And so the decision to go to Atlanta was very easy. I grew up in Pittsburgh and it was time to go. So that was, going for undergrad and being there and staying there afterward. Um, all those things made complete sense. The decision to leave Pittsburgh after law school was much harder because I actually spent time trying to find mentorship. The work that I'm doing now here is very much the work I wanted to do before I left to go to New York. And it is about developing an art scene that is commercial, an entertainment scene and space that is commercial. The students that are currently in school here have no concept of how nightlife has devolved in this city and what is possible as more people are coming back here. And so it's really trying to support the ecosystem to be able to be back on the map. I mean, like, we know the history of the Hill District here. We know what the Hill District means to jazz historically. We know what Pittsburgh has meant to music in general. And so there are things, we are known as a sports town, and there's all this stuff intersecting. But going to New York gave me more insight into what was going on in the industry, and it connected me to people in the industry in ways that to this day make complete sense. And I would encourage you to go get the knowledge you need. And if it's here and you're able to get it in Pittsburgh, great. If you have to leave, go get it and then bring it back. It's there's plenty of space to grow here.
Kelly, how about your decision to head out to LA from after you left college?
Well, for me, it was an easy decision, and for a lot of the same reasons that Jackie just spoke about. When I left Pittsburgh, I knew that I wanted to continue working in live, in the live performance space, and I wanted to tour. I really wanted to go on tour. And I left for the connections I knew I would make in Los Angeles. And also, I knew that the opportunities to learn and to work with people in the entertainment industry, I thought I would have to go to either New York or Los Angeles. And Los Angeles just sounded appealing to me because I wanted to come to California. I hadn't been to the West Coast. I'd been to New York, and I really just wanted to go West and try something different. I had no idea I would now, I'm going on, I think, 32 years, I think, out here now. But I really left for the connections, for the opportunity, for the knowledge. I didn't know if I would stay out here as long as I have. And, now I have a family and a child, and now I'm here, and my job is here. But, I think, to add on to what Jackie said, there are plenty of opportunities locally. You can work for a venue, you can work for a promoter. You can, work for any number of marketing companies or ticketing. You can certainly learn and gain knowledge where you are, and then you can seek other opportunities elsewhere. I think you expose yourself to maybe what you're interested in if you don't really know what you're interested in. Because I hear a lot of people say, I want to work in music, I want to work in events, but they don't really have a specific direction or know what that means and what that entails. So, take a job working in, marketing or ticketing or, at a venue or with a promoter, and that will kind of maybe dictate and expose you to things. And then you decide what you are interested in, and then you can focus on pursuing that. And if that means leaving because you'll have better connections in that field elsewhere, then you do that. Or if you can do what you want to do and stay local, then you do that. And then you just, evolve and learn and grow and exceed at what you're doing locally. So there really are opportunities everywhere. But I do also agree with Jackie that there's something to be said for leaving and going to a new city and having to stand on your own 2 feet without the safety net of your family. And, my family, like Jackie's, had no connection to entertainment. I had no industry connections whatsoever through my family. And there's something to be said for going off on your own and having to struggle and having to really seek out connections and mentors and surround yourself with really good people. And, also that, that brings me to, I wanted to reinforce what Jackie said about advocating for yourself, demanding and earning respect, especially in an industry that is for women, in an industry that is very male dominated then and still now. And it's walking a very fine line about, if you're too assertive, then you're perceived in a certain way, and maybe you don't get an opportunity, but you have to be assertive enough to garner the respect of your peers and of potential employers, and really advocate for yourself and make sure you're being treated fairly. You're doing your job, you're doing a good job, and you should be respected and rewarded for that. And it's really, really important, what Jackie said, to always be advocating for yourself and, not accept crap. And if you're in a bad situation, say something and get yourself out of the situation, move on, know when it's time to leave and move on to another opportunity, because a lot of people find themselves stuck and they don't know how to move on from a company or from a job, and kind of turn it into another opportunity elsewhere. And you can't be afraid to make that change when needed, when it's time.
No, that's great. Kelly, let's turn our attention. It's been almost 2 years since live entertainment really came to a crashing, almost instantaneous halt with COVID. Can you talk just for a little bit about your experience, both of you, through your experiences through COVID, and then also kind of what's happening here on the other side? What are some of the trends that you're seeing in LA, and then Jackie, what you're seeing here in Pittsburgh? So kind of two parts. First of all, kind of the experience through COVID, and as we emerge, hopefully from COVID, what things are looking like today.
For me, I was working at Live Nation at the time. And as you said, the industry came to a screeching halt. So I was basically at home. Initially, I was undoing all of the work I had done because tours were canceling. We had to, really negotiate our way out of agreements and payments that were coming due to vendors. Taking shows off of sale, refunding tickets to ticket holders. At the time, initially, no one knew, how long we were going to be in this. It was like, oh, it's a few weeks. Oh, it's a couple of months. Oh, it's 6 months. And it kept going and going. But initially, nobody really knew how long there wouldn't be live events. And I don't think anyone anticipated that it would be as long as it was. So after a flurry of undoing all of the negotiations that we had done and now negotiating our way out of things, I really became my daughter's homeschool Zoom overseer for Zoom classes, because all kids weren't in school. And so my focus really became on my daughter, who's now 12. When it started, she was 10. And helping her through school. And that was really my focus, because there was nothing else going on. Now, as we're coming out of it, I spent my entire summer negotiating with all of the major promoters, Live Nation, AEG, all of the major festivals, the independent festivals, the festivals that are owned by AEG and Live Nation, negotiating COVID cancellation clauses and COVID language, and trying to navigate knowing that we would eventually emerge from this, and what shows would look like and what live events would look like with all of the mandates and restrictions and protocols that were in place, that were constantly changing. They were changing from city to city, county to county, state to state, and internationally. So there was a lot of trying to figure things out and educate myself in what was happening locally everywhere with the different mandates and protocols. And then as the business started opening back up and people started booking tours again, and right now I am just flooded with agreements, because everybody wants to tour, because artists didn't earn any money for 2 years other than doing virtual performances here and there. And so I did spend some time negotiating those deals, streaming, virtual events, things like that, to now it is full steam ahead with events, coming back. So you've got artists competing for venue availabilities. You've got artists competing for equipment and production and crews, because everybody wants to be out on the road at once to not only to to make the money that they lost over the past 2 years, but they miss being in front of audiences and performing, and they miss what their life, their livelihood. That's what they did. And then you also have the promoters and the festivals that haven't had any income for the past 2 years. So everybody, it's a mad dash to get out there, to get on sale, and to hold their festivals, for artists to tour. But we're still navigating, although restrictions are being lifted, I'm still seeing so much of a difference, not so much in the US between states anymore, so much, but with all the artists who are touring internationally, and there are different country to country, there are different restrictions and protocols still. So we have, an example is we have some artists who will not get vaccinated, and so they are still not able to perform in certain venues and in certain countries, and then you have the restrictions on the audience. Initially we had the masking and the vaccination, proof of vaccination and proof of a negative COVID test, and that presented challenges. There were a lot of refunds going on. There was a lot of fluctuation in what the artists guarantees. The promoters are trying to renegotiate deals from shows that had been postponed and canceled, and now we could reschedule them, but they were, sending in offers for significantly reduced guarantees, because a lot of refunds had come in because audience members either weren't vaccinated or didn't want to wear masks, or people were still just afraid to be in large groups. So there are all these issues that are coming into play that we've never had to deal with before. And it's new, it's the Wild West. There were, just so many elements going into the negotiations that I never had to deal with before, that I'm sure Jackie never had to deal with before. No one did. And no one could anticipate, that this would happen. And so it's been challenging, and it's been very interesting. And I'm glad everything is coming back, but it's still to be seen how it all how everything will unfold as tours start to go out late spring and summer. And see how attendance is. I mean, people seem to be buying tickets. People are sick of being cooped up in their houses for 2 years. So we're seeing a lot, we're seeing ticket sales through the roof, for a lot of events. A trend I'm seeing is increased ticket prices for festivals and for shows, because the artists are trying to make up for lost income. The promoters are trying to make up for lost income. And unfortunately, that gets passed on to the ticket buyers and concert attendees, because somebody has to pay for it.
Jackie, before I'm going to ask you the same question, but Kelly, is that the shortages in labor because so many people are touring? Do you think that maybe creates some opportunities for some students and some interns? And if so, where should they maybe be looking? Is this a good time maybe to try to get some work if you're a aspiring, a college student who's aspiring to break into the entertainment industry?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, and this is something that, we had a panel specifically about this at Polestar in June, which is a lot of the touring crew personnel. They're independent contractors, they're not employees. And when the industry stopped, they had no choice but to get other jobs. And we're seeing a lot of former touring personnel not want to come back to the industry, because now they have jobs with benefits, they have insurance, they get to stay home, and they're making more money sometimes than they were making on the road. So there's definitely a shortage of touring personnel. There's definitely, I think the union workers at the venues, I think they're okay. I think that they're all going to come back. They've, this is more for the independent contractors, but I would say there's definitely probably an opportunity to get work on production crews at venues and non-union venues for these students. And there are still a lot of non-union venues out there. Shortages in equipment, it is definitely because everybody is trying to tour at once. So everyone is competing for the same sound equipment, lighting equipment, staging equipment. And so certainly those types of vendors, there could be an opportunity to go in, and I know that a lot of those vendors are doing training programs to get people trained up quickly so that they can send them out on the road with all of these tours that are going out.
That's great. Um, Bob just asked a question. Is there a concern that highly skilled workers who are left are being replaced by less skilled workers?
Highly skilled workers that are still willing to work being replaced by less skilled workers? I don't believe so. I don't see that happening. I think that the people who are willing to work, and specifically regarding people who work for artist tours, artists like to surround themselves with the same people, and they will certainly hire back the people that are willing to go out on tour because they know the artist, they know the artist's equipment, they have been on the road with them before, but they are also going to augment anybody who has left and not willing to come back and tour with newcomers to the industry. And so, yes, they will be less skilled, but hopefully they will be mentored and trained up, not only by the companies, but by their coworkers. And I am hearing that is happening. And they need people to work. And so they're certainly going to welcome currently unskilled people who are willing to come in and train and do the job, because there is a definite need for workforce.
That's great.
And I have
Jackie,
to say that to that point too, skilling up and training up, production is such a good place to land yourself because it is a collaborative art form. Like, just think, like, if you sound bad and somebody could have taught you how to not make that mistake and they chose not to, the person who didn't teach you is the one who's going to be frowned upon just as much as whatever mistake you made as a newcomer. So be very mindful of, like, it was, when I say my time in production taught me so much of how to navigate this industry and survive it. It's because it teaches you how to love. Like, there's like it's a certain level of, like, we love the work, we love what we're doing, we love what we're putting out, and there's a standard at which we do it. So I'm going to learn and I'm going to teach you and I'm going to share with you because we all look good. And so that's what you want. You want to be in spaces where everyone's working so hard to make the art shine, to make the work shine, because that is what making this, that's what entertainment is. You are the Wizard of Oz. You are behind the curtain. Be behind the curtain unless you're in front of the curtain. But like, but the behind the scenes work is so much about you being humble, not humiliated, humble.
Exactly. I
Jackie,
could not agree more.
What are you seeing kind of as we emerge from COVID here more locally in terms of the art scene and the entertainment scene? Are you seeing it pick up a little bit from the perspective of the artist and maybe some of the venue owners, or any trends that you're got your finger on right now?
I would say here everything is picking back up. You know, folks are, much to Kelly's point. I think Pittsburgh's not very different in that people want to be out the house. They want to be experiencing art and live entertainment as much as possible. And so I'm seeing more shows, but what I am seeing as well are restrictions are lifted. And I know, like, last summer, we were all trying to figure out what to do. And so you see venues, you see producers taking on the responsibility and wanting to still be responsible for making sure that their guests and their audience members are safe, that the people who are performing feel safe. And so you will still see heightened safety measures. And that is to protect, that's a liability risk. It's trying to limit their exposure. So you might still have places where that have the right to ask you to mask up, have the right to ask you to show a vaccine card, and they're private businesses and they're allowed to do that. But keep in mind that it might not have anything to do with you. It might have everything to do with their mandate and their mission. I know a lot of arts organizations who have a mission to support people in the community who are being left out. And those are people right now who cannot unmask, who are immunocompromised. There are people in our community who are not really, and children as well, who may not be able to be vaccinated. So Pittsburgh tends to have a more family friendly, family centered entertainment and arts culture here. And so those are the things that I'm seeing on the COVID side. But folks are ready to get started. There's funding out there for restarting the arts. So you see, like, the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust is really working hard to get folks. They have an amazing lineup this year. So they've been going full steam ahead, and I think we're going to continue to see that trend as you know that people were deeply impacted. The arts community was deeply impacted by things shutting down here in Pittsburgh. And luckily, the foundations, artists themselves came together and really supported one another. There was a lot of, you know, um, community care happening during COVID, but now we're in a different space, and so it's time to get back to the work. And I think folks are definitely picking up steam. So
Yeah, that's great. Kelly, are you seeing, and Jackie as well, but are you seeing some new contract language for these contracts the last year? Is there any, without giving away any secret sauce here, are you seeing either the terms being inserted in the contract around COVID, post COVID, or even just post pandemic, whatever that may be, more expanding definitions of what could impact, and then who bears that liability? Man, I mean, I'm just hearing you talk about the guarantees. I mean, who absorbs when you're renegotiating a contract that you had already negotiated? Who's expected to absorb that loss? Is that shared among all stakeholders, or how's that work?
Well, the promoters want the artist to bear the cost, and the artists want the promoters to bear the cost, and it falls to myself and Jackie to negotiate something somewhere in the middle. Because what's really important to know is that communicable disease is not an insurable event anymore. It used to be that you could insure. So I'll back up. So artists can take out, and promoters used to be able to take out a non-appearance or cancellation insurance policy. It's very expensive, and some artists and some promoters choose not to take out the policy. But what happened is after when the insurance companies started getting wind of COVID, and this was in January of 2021. Is that right? Is that the right year? 2020.
2020. Yeah.
I've lost years. When the insurance companies started getting wind of what was happening, the underwriters stopped underwriting policies and they started excluding specifically communicable disease, pandemic. And so you could know that was excluded from a cancellation or non-appearance policy. Now, some artists got in under the radar and they were paid out. I know of some artists and some promoters that were actually paid out for these canceled shows, but to a large extent, expenses for tours that were already on tour or on sale or were already out on tour, the artist just took the hit, or the promoter took the hit. Both people took the hit. So what's happening now is there are force majeure clauses in the contracts, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's act of God. It's an unforeseeable event that causes the performance, prevents the performance from happening. And the artist contracts say, well, okay, if something like this happens, but I'm ready, willing, and able to perform, I still want to get paid. And it's always a negotiation with the promoter, because the promoter, if they don't have non-appearance insurance, which a lot of them don't, they say, if this type of event occurs, we're not paying you, whether you're ready, willing, and able or not. So my job is to negotiate something where the artist could retain the deposit, or the artist retains expenses, or things like that. What we're seeing is an expansion in the definition of force majeure, which to include COVID, SARS, pandemic, anything like that. I don't necessarily know if it should be included in the definition of force majeure because it's foreseeable right now. It's not an unforeseeable event. However, it can be treated the same way a force majeure is. And so I'm spending most of my time negotiating now how a cancellation due to COVID is going to be treated. And when I say due to COVID, I mean government mandates limiting capacity, or a complete shutdown on mass gatherings, or what to do if the expenses to adhere to protocols or mandates are so great that it makes it financially impossible to present the event. And so we're negotiating what happens in those instances. I can, like, for individual concerts, it's an easier negotiation because you're dealing with an artist, you're dealing with a promoter, and we negotiate the clause for that particular show. All summer, I was negotiating with the major festivals, and I was negotiating on behalf of all of our clients, and they were negotiating on behalf of all of their festivals for what would happen. And what we ended up with was a kill fee structure. So if the event were canceled due to COVID restrictions put in place or expanded prior to the event happening, then if it were a certain number of days out from the festival, the artist would get this much. If it were within this time frame, the artist would get this much, and the percentage that the artist would get would increase as you got closer to the date of the show and a cancellation happening within a window closer to the show. And so that is how we dealt with it for the larger festivals. So the artists were taking a risk, the promoters were taking a risk, but it was a shared risk. And the promoters were willing to come to the table with these, with this kill fee structure is what we called it. So that's really how we've been dealing with COVID in contracts. Now, as restrictions are lifted, the negotiations are getting easier. However, I don't think the language is ever going to disappear. And I'm sure Jackie will agree. It's never going to disappear. And now it just will live in the contracts with the force majeure clause or outside of the force majeure clause, but it will be treated, very similar to how a force majeure is treated. Because really it's no one's fault, right? If a show gets canceled, but it's never going to disappear. It's not like, okay, COVID's not a thing anymore, so we can remove it from the contracts. It's just now going to live in the contracts. And, as the insurance industry catches up, and it's less of a risk of a show getting canceled due to a COVID-related event, the price will maybe come down a little bit on insuring it. But it's never going to be cheap.
Okay, great. We have about 3 minutes here, Jackie. I just want to, Jackie, let you answer that. But if anybody has any questions too, we do have about 3 to 5 minutes here to go. So Jackie, but I do want to give you your perspective on this as well.
What I was going to say is, and what I love too is, like, I know we all talk about, well, things aren't the same. It's like they're not, but now you have people dynamics that we could not get in the middle of and say, like, how can we do this differently? You got to see people really negotiate new ways of bearing risk, which is so important as in the state of where things are in the industry and overall. And so it's really important to also, yes, maybe this will never go away, but I don't know if that's a terrible thing. Now we know that people are amenable to kill structures. Now we know that these are terms that people can be flexible on, and this can become a part of how you use this same solution in other parts of your practice. And so, Kelly's always be learning is this is how it looks. This is how it feels whether you're on the business side or the legal side. You want to be able to be creative and support folks in still getting to the point, which is the point is to perform, have a great show, and everybody gets paid. That's really the goal.
That's the end goal.
So when you stick to that and then you realize, oh, it's completely rational for us to bear risk in this way, then it's like, oh, cool, we can do this. And it changes the way people deal. So COVID has been challenging, but we've been getting a little looser and it feels good. And everybody's like a little lighter, like, it's serious, but is it that serious? And so it's a good thing. I just
Right.
wanted to speak to that as well.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, Jackie and me and people like us who've been dealing with this and learning about this and trying to figure this out when no one knew what to do. No one knew what was going on. And we've really created, I don't know if that we've created new policy is the correct way to state it, but we've been at the forefront, people like me and like Jackie, of kind of putting new policies and a new way of dealing um, with cancellations in place and moving forward. And like Jackie said, applying what we did with COVID maybe to other areas of the contract, other clauses in the contract. And we've really kind of created, I guess we've really kind of created new policy throughout this.
Or emerging trends.
Emerging trends. And there you go, full circle.
There it is. No, does anybody have any questions? This is such a treat to have both of you on, and we
Katie
really
asked,
thank you.
what is your opinion on tours that are using a combination of venues that require vaccines and health checks, and then others that don't? Do you think that will cause legal problems for artists or even just publicity issues?
I do not believe it's going to cause problems. I mean, what the artists are doing is they're obviously well aware in advance when an agent is booking a venue, what those restrictions are. And there are a lot more open and honest discussions with artist managers with our agents than there used to be. Agents are, really kind of afraid to give managers information sometimes, which I think is a mistake. And in this instance, they're having to be very upfront with managers. Like from last summer, telling the managers, okay, we've got this kill fee structure in place, so don't spend any money until we get within this window, because you're only going to get this % back if the show's canceled this far out. They're having those conversations. They're having conversations about, okay, so you're not vaccinated, so I can't book you at this venue because this venue is still requiring audience and all performing artists and their crew to be fully vaccinated and boosted to walk into our building. So the artists know going in. I've had a couple of artists that actually the protocols changed after something was already booked and on sale. And it was a very honest conversation with the promoter, the manager, and the agent about what do we do? Do we postpone this show until restrictions are lifted? Do we proceed with the show and take the risk that there may be a lot of refunds? But it's making people engage more than they ever have before and address issues up front. And I see you shaking your head that you agree, and that's what I'm seeing. And the most challenging thing is artists who are touring in Europe, because each country is different. I had an artist last week where a restriction, and I forget what country they were going to and from, but a restriction changed while they were already there, and they couldn't get into the country because they didn't have they didn't have their booster. They were vaccinated but didn't have a booster, and they couldn't get in and perform their show. So those challenges, yes, exist, but I think for the most part, as new tours are being booked for summer and for later and into next year, we kind of know what we're dealing with, and we're just hoping that things continue to open up and that trend continues.
And I think that it's just about, I love telling people, look, it's the cost benefits analysis. Do you want to keep fighting the vaccination requirements and not go get your booster? Or do you, you start to help people weigh a lot of these decisions out loud, and asking those questions. Is this worth it? Is it worth it to you? Is this how you want to move? And I love the transparent conversations that are happening. I mean, that's already how I deal. I'm like, I can't coddle too many people's feelings. And Kelly, I think in our position, we don't have to. Like, people expect us to be kind of like,
they want us to be the bad guy.
And then look, and I used to, my favorite thing when I was working at Harry Walker, I was like, I'll be your bad guy. Yeah. I will happily play the role of, your villain in this story. Let them know that I'm a guard dog and I'm ready to get into it, And so and then people would talk to me and be like, oh wow, that was a breeze. And it's like, yeah.
Right.
But I think it is very much about, I want people to have transparent conversations. I want artists in particular to be very clear about the agency that they have in all of this, because what happens is people think artists don't have any. Artists are taught, it feels like, as you're going through your creative progression. Oh, you don't really have to worry about that. You'll have lawyers for that. You'll have managers for that. You'll have agents for that. As if those people are the ones who make decisions. And in every single one of those relationships, it still comes down to those people work at your leisure. Those people work at your direction. So and they all know that that is their fiduciary duty to you. So they can't make these decisions for you. And if you have not spent any level of your time or any effort to think through how you're going to commercialize what it is that you're doing, then you're just going to be sitting there in la la land, and people get taken advantage of in la la land. So you need to be mindful. I got into this industry, the legal side, because I was tired of seeing my peers in our 20s being intensely creative people who were being taken advantage of for our labor on set, our labor with writing things and doing things and like ghost writing things and never getting paid, never, or not understanding that we should be retaining the rights to different things. And I do this so that we as artists are being paid fairly. Like my motto is no starving artists. I don't believe in that, especially in commercial arts. I do not believe in the starving artist model. That is foolishness in this day and age. So go get yours. And if you need help getting yours, get help. Ask questions. Come to these things and ask the questions you have.
Great.
Wow. Well, thank you both so much. This was incredibly informative, and really appreciate the time. And if our students have any questions, I'm sure, Ed, can we route some questions to Kelly, to you and Jackie?
We can filter
Yeah.
them. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
We'll find them.
All
They
right.
won't get away from us.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. This was incredible. I look forward to hopefully talking to you both again sometime in the very near future, but we really appreciate your time, and very, very, very informative. I know I learned a lot here today as well. So thank you, and
It was
good
a
luck going
pleasure.
forward here.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Nice to meet you, Kelly.
Nice to meet you, Jackie.
Take care.
Bye.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye, Ed.
Yep. Okay.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Hagen. Bye-bye. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Great one.